I think that there's a certain amount of violence ahead of us. And at the end of that violence, there will be peace, as always. But the longer we wait with structural reforms and truly solving certain issues, the more violent the violence in itself will become.
Welcome to the GoldRepublic Podcast. My name is Bart Brands.
And I'm Alexei Jordanov. In our weekly podcast, we invite guests from all over the world to get valuable insights
into the emergence of a new monetary system through the lens of precious metals, cryptocurrencies, and other financial instruments.
Because I have the impression that it's always a circle. That's what we basically describe. It's a vicious circle that keeps on accelerating and keeps on being deeper and more complicated and more ugly, actually.
Yeah.
And usually that's what we also describe in the financial world as boom and bust cycles as well. Yeah. We hit a wall, and right now this whole discussion is about describing the wall, but we haven't really discussed about how painful it will be and how exactly it might fold out this year, next year. What are the events that will trigger this one step further? Like if you had the crystal ball in front of you.
Well, on the very short run, we will, at least in Amsterdam, if you look at the housing bubble and the Netherlands, it will go up some more. So everything will be done to please investors to buy our mortgages. So standards for banking will be more lax, so that they can do more crazy stuff like they did before, just right before Lehman Brothers. Tourists will come back. So you have this mass tourism in Amsterdam, and it's all based on drugs and prostitution. It's not really something to be proud of. It means that houses can be used as illegal hotels. Local governments, they allow it. It's also impossible for them to stop this kind of low quality tourism, because you have the Schengen agreement in the Eurozone and in the European Union. So you can't really say, okay, we've had 10 million tourists coming for drugs from Southern Europe, we don't want any more. Well, you can't physically stop them. That's impossible. So on the really short run, housing prices will probably go up. And if you think, okay, I need a certain investment or whatever, I don't think that housing prices in the short run will go down. However, if you keep on doing this, the greater amount of fuel in your bubble, when it explodes, the louder the bang will be. That's very obvious. So at a certain point in time, in the near future, you will see a collapse. And then and that is how all bubbles explode, then people who actually bought real estate or Bitcoin maybe with a loan, it happened a few weeks ago, exactly what we discussed. Then they see the prices going down, they will start selling their assets because they have to. That will create more supply than demand on the short run. That will make prices go down a little bit more. And then you get this snowball effect. And then you see that exactly the way it went up, it will also go down. And when that will happen, I don't know. I think that central banks and European institutions have, thanks to Corona is fantastic in that regard. They can do whatever they want. They can take a lot of our freedoms. They can give themselves roles for which they were not designed to keep this going. So you can say, okay, you know what? People need to get more mortgage, higher mortgages. Well, they say, you know what? We need to do it because of the climate. You now have a climate mortgage. And then those loans that people take out because of climate change, that's what so home improvement because of climate change, those bonds can be sold as well and securitized as well. So that's how you keep the party going for the banks. So your household debt in the Netherlands, which is already insanely high, and it is very unhealthy. It will go up a little bit more and a little bit more. And what I'm afraid of is that the fabric of society, as they call it, you can tell that I'm a real social democrat, maybe. The fabric of society will be damaged, and maybe irreparably. Because you say to a whole generation of young people, and hardworking young people, you will not have a future.
You will own nothing.
You will own nothing, and you should be happy. That's Klaus Schwab. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. Okay, I own nothing, but I'm not happy, Mr. Schwab. That's what I'm afraid of, and that's the social aspect of it. I've talked a lot about this, and in my new book, I will also touch on it. But if you keep the Dutch dream, as I call it, if you take that from people, or the Greek dream, what will they do? Will they simply accept it? Will they morally and even physically defend a system that works against them? Why should you do that? Why should Jorge, the dishwasher in Madrid, why should he defend a liberal democracy? He will get very, very susceptible to radical ideas. Mm-hmm. And it might be radical Islam, it might be new forms of extreme right, sorts of fascism. You might have people that literally want, maybe I've given people ideas and they want this rebirth of Stalin that will actually take and redistribute from people. And what I notice, and I'm not saying that I'm in favor of either of those three forms that you can have, but you can also have eco-socialism, as they call it, whereby people say, okay, I want to go away, I want to be independent anyway, and I want to leave it, so I'll just go live on the countryside, grow my own strawberries. Well, I think those people, the ego-angry people, they might be the least damaging. People will start to move away from society as we know it, and it is already happening in all directions. People are getting more susceptible to extreme ideas because you take away their livelihood. You take away the idea that if you just behave, so if you're a young man, especially young men, like I always say, men are more stupid than women. They will misbehave at some point in time. They will test the fringes of the system in which they live. They will drink too much as a teenager, and they will fight a little bit with the police, and the police know that. They have a little bit of a crime record. Maybe you steal a bike or something. I did it as a youth. Then I had to sweep City Hall. That was my punishment, but I don't have a criminal record. And after that, I decided, okay, I will go and study and be a normal, decent guy. What happens right now is that people, when they exit the penal system of any kind, whatever that way will be, first of all, the system that's trying to support them, I'm looking reintegration into society. That organization has been slashed. It has been there's been budget cuts. We said, okay, we want to lower corporate income tax rate for these foreign investors who invest in our housing, or not invest, they actually take the money from it. They need lower corporate taxes, and as a result, we're going to make some social cuts. So somebody gets out of prison, there's nobody to pick him up, and if he thinks, okay, I'm going to be a decent guy from now on, and I will work hard, like Jorge the dishwasher, you will not get a future. That moment, that person is very susceptible to becoming either very criminal or very politically radicalized, and that will add up in a way, and that will cause something to happen, and the lessons in history. I don't understand how people can miss it. For example, I've read the book Long Walk to Freedom from Nelson Mandela. And then he had to do some errands, so you have this apartheid era, and he started law. So he could work at a law firm, but because he was a black African, they made him do little chores. So, okay, you're a lawyer, but you're black, so get some coffee. And he had to pick somebody up from the airport. And there was this guy, when he drove to the airport, that he met, and he picked him up. He said he was hitchhiking, was another black guy. And when he got in his car, he saw that his clothes were a little bit mangled, and he said, "What's going on with you? It's just a conversation." And then the hitchhiker, he explained that for him, because of all the restrictions and the situation built around him, I'm not literally trying to compare apartheid to the European system that we have now, but they do touch one another. This person said, I cannot have any economic freedom. It is impossible for me to work. I'm being barred from all sorts of places, from jobs. So what else is there for me to become a criminal? That's what Mandela wrote. He said, okay, that made a big impression on me. Then later on he did what he did. He went to prison and he became president. when he was president, he wrote a book, Long Walk to Freedom, and he remembered that moment that he said, okay, there's somebody who just wants to be decent, but that you don't give him the opportunity to be decent because the surroundings make it impossible for him. Then you get political radicalization. And I always wonder, how can people not see this? How can they live in a house and say, oh, how fantastic, I bought this house and it went up in price 10% in just 1 year. I'm getting rich automatically without even working. That's fantastic. And they don't understand that there's a downside to it. And I think you asked me to look in my sphere, my glass globe. I think that that you will see a lot of political fragmentation and societal fragmentation, and it's already there. Like I said, it's people are being driven away. There's a wedge being driven into our society. A lot of people they don't even talk to each other anymore. So if you are in one fraction of society, one splinter, you don't talk to somebody else. You say, okay, what they say, that's rubbish anyway. That they're conspiracy theories, or they're the globalist elite. People start believing all sorts of ideas, and it is for a moderate person like me, it is becoming more and more and more difficult to prove that the extremists are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that I see in my life, and I find it very worrisome.
Would you then say that, coming back to the what you explained about putting a fence around the Herengracht, that in the end we all lose?
That appeals to you, that idea?
No, I'm from The Hague,
kidding.
so
you don't care.
No. The Hague.
The Hague is next.
Yeah,
that's the whole.
Well, but the thing is that in the beginning it looks like you have an advantage, maybe, but in the end we all lose, just like they did in the former Soviet Union.
Exactly. But you don't see it in the short run. That's the way you let it happen.
It's also a certain golden cage. Like just the analogy you gave, the John Doe, every man is an island to himself. Is that it's the narrow, like it's the self-interest that prevails over everything else. The hyper-individualism, which the Chinese now basically made in their nature of society, collectivized, but beating the capitalists at their own game. Yeah, in a way, is the rule of money. Right. So isn't that like, because now it's getting also more philosophical, more like towards sociology and also history.
I don't mind. Yeah.
And I love it. And then the question is this a form of a system still a capitalist system? Is a hybrid capitalism? What kind of evolution can we expect from that? I mean, it's the core of money itself and the way we perceive value and we organize around it.
Well, if you look at the 18th century, 19th century economics books, Adam Smith, David Ricardo, etc. This is not what they meant. What they had in mind when they mentioned the liberal society. And the idea of a liberal society is that you are free, you are an individual. Of course, you are linked to other people. Like I said previously, Adam Smith, from the book Wealth of Nations, maybe the founder of modern capitalism, he was a deeply religious man who believed in the fabric of society. And he just noticed, okay, this is how economics works. He wasn't prescribing, he was describing. He was just explaining what he saw, and that's the basis of modern economics. And the idea is that if there's a certain shortage, let's say in housing, then the market will fix it. If you just let people be good at what they are best at, then some construction worker will show up, build you a house, problem solved. That's the only moral justification for higher prices. It is because it will draw more supply, and then scarcity is magically vanishes. That is the capitalist ideal. Well, right now first of all you have governments that are doing things that have nothing to do with the free market. I mean, you're bailing out banks, so the ones that caused the problem, and you don't want to deal with the problem because you want to get re-elected and you don't want to bring painful messages to people. So you let it escalate a little bit more, well, then you end up bailing out banks. It is very simple. There's no other solution. Well, that's not capitalist. It's not social democratic either, because you bring money from poor people to the rich. The outcome, like I said a few minutes ago, the outcome of the corona crisis is that the richest man in Europe went from 50 billion to 200 billion. Well, I don't want to. That's not socialist either. That's not liberal. It's crony capitalism. It is that nothing good can come out of this. And real hardworking, decent people with no money, who could become your middle class, like Dambisa Moyo calls it. That's the appealing idea of upward social mobility. That is the whole reason why you need to have economic growth. So you're poor, maybe you're in school, or like I said, maybe you just come out of prison, or whatever. You look at somebody, he has a nice house, nice wife, assuming that it's a man, which is logical because most criminals are men. But then you have this appealing idea. That's the whole idea behind it. That's upward social mobility. That's economic growth. And in order to make upward social mobility possible, feasible even, you need economic growth. And economic growth is not generated now either. And we now have all these climate plans, as they call it, and they will make it even worse. Because now your electricity bill will also go up. So it's a dystopia. And every movement that we make, even through money, central bank digital currency, etc., getting rid of cash, that means that all our assets are centralized, and it will be very easy to tax them even more. So it's if you want to make a historical comparison, or what is this? You ask me, okay, what is the system that we're heading to? Well, it's George Orwell.
Talking about, because I think the central bank digital currencies are really interesting to touch upon. A couple days ago on Dutch news, we saw someone explaining how the European Central Bank could use central bank digital currencies to, incentivize spending or cut out the middlemen, which they called the banks. Mm-hmm. But then they used the Chinese example of central bank digital currency. Of course, in China, large parts of China are under a social credit system. If you integrate a central bank digital currency (CBDC) into a social credit system, that would indeed, I think, become a total control system. Would it not?
Yeah. And and the whole idea behind this central bank digital currency, let's put it this way. What's the use of it?
It's more control to be able to...
to a civilian.
I think it's just to be sure that your own private bank will be able to still serve you at some point. Isn't that the whole concept, to basically park your money at the central bank so that it basically is guaranteed?
But those banks, like we just discussed, those banks, you have deposit insurance throughout Europe. It has become European right now, so there's no need for it. All the reasons, the official reasons why you should have a central bank digital currency. I mean, there is a central bank digital currency. It's called the euro. If I want to pay €1 or whatever, I can just use my app, and I will get another app, which is called the central bank digital currency, and I have my own bank's app. If you have two coins, you have €2, and the relative value never changes, so €1 always equals 1 or 2 central bank digital currency euros. What's the whole point of having it?
They actually said it was a solution looking for a problem, but
yes.
then again,
exactly.
And then again, we see from centralization and power being accumulated that every crisis will be used to implement, like you said before, to implement new systems of control. Yeah. So could this central bank digital currency be the next step into further control, all in the effort of trying to manage a system that is in decline and it will inevitably collapse, and then we will, maybe start over.
Oh, nothing and still be happy. Yes. Maybe I'm just being silly, but I really don't see the point in central bank digital currency if you look at it from the point of view of a consumer or an entrepreneur, because
maybe
that's
one argument.
Yeah?
One argument.
Okay, you really have to dig deep by it.
Yeah, no,
but please
a very
tell me.
simple argument. If I want to send money to France, it takes me 3 days, right?
No?
Well, it does. To me, tell me another example. Yeah, I'm happy to use that. Takes me three banking days to transfer money. It's not instant.
But it would be very easy for us to make that. If you say,
an
okay,
app.
the European. Okay, sorry for immediately saying no. I can remember paying money to somebody else in Europe, and it went pretty efficiently and instantly.
Without any regards of the banking days. So on the Sunday, just like you would transfer a Bitcoin, you can transfer it like 24/7.
But technically speaking, you could do the same with a banking account, with a ordinary banking account.
Yeah, but I mean, why isn't it still like they're still talking about integration of international bank transfers within the European Union?
And interestingly, that still turns out to be too difficult. So we bail out the banks with literally trillions of euros, and they still can figure this out. But if you this situation was like this in the Netherlands before, if you want to make an interbank transaction, as they call it, and they did it because if you pay money, then the receiving bank will put it on a different account and keep the interest for a few days. But there's no interest right now. So
you don't want to have money on your balance sheet.
You don't want to have it because if you have money on your balance sheet, then you'll get taxed by the ECB. So no, you don't want to have that money. I think that from a theoretically speaking, we could end the situation right now with if we ask some smart IT guys, for example, that would be way more efficient. You already have a currency, which I think is very weak institutionally. But apart from this, there's really no need for a central bank digital currency. I don't see it.
So is it a solution looking for a problem, or maybe the next time a crisis? And we are still in a crisis, so it could be introduced anyway. Well,
what I think, what we could do, we could look back in a year. So I'm inviting myself, but you already have digital currencies, and those were ordinary people building a system. I know a lot of these people. With all due respect, I like to call them nerds because they're very good at IT, and a lot of them are philosophical, and I like them. I like those people. And they've come up with a solution. And then the central bank says, oh, we need to copy that. To me, it looks like there's a central bank who wants to avoid that its monopoly on cash and printing money is being taken away. Because if the crypto market, and it would be, let's say that it would become much more stable, then that would be a threat to the monopoly of the central bank. I mean, it is fiat money, as they call it. You have to believe in it. You have to believe in a euro. You needed to believe in the Deutsche Mark.
You're forced through violence.
Basically, you're forced to believe in
violence to believe in it.
Exactly.
You don't function in the system.
Well, if people start to believe less and less in what they're forced to believe in, then they will create alternatives. And now the central bank says, "Oh, I'm going to do something with that alternative." And like we mentioned before, the previous discussion, the Chinese central bank has already decided that they want to crack down on Bitcoin, and then they will also eventually come up with their own central bank digital currency. Oh, hey, you want to own a digital currency because you're very hip and you like it? Well, I offer you the solution. That would be a pretext to remove the solution that already exists.
Well, and
there's nothing. If I'm wrong, if I'm too pessimistic, maybe we should invite somebody who is more in favor of central bank digital currency. I know Joost van Kuppenveld. He's another journalist. He's a little bit less skeptical than I am. Maybe you can invite him, and maybe he can tell it. But I agree with you. It is a solution to a problem that doesn't exist, and those solutions are usually meant to do something else, and that would be a crackdown on both Bitcoin and cash. Because now you can say, oh, you don't need cash anyway, and what's the use of cryptocurrency? It's only destabilizing, so let's forbid it. And if kids still want to play with digital money, well, we give them the central bank digital currency, which will then obviously be tied to the euro. So as a currency, if one currency always keeps its value in relation to the other, there's no point in having it. So this looks like the start of a crackdown on cash and Bitcoin. Yeah, there's nothing else that I can imagine.
Yeah, it's just like any person can actually create their own currency, like merchants did in ancient China in the 10th century.
Exactly.
Printing notes,
or cookies,
just like cookies or seashells.
We agree on the value of a cookie.
Exactly. They're all basically based on letting people wanting to believe and agreeing that this something is money, but needs to be used. And the only way I think the central digital bank currencies can actually be used and useful is that when they give incentives of, I don't know, like maybe better deals for if you want to take out a loan, cashback like models like they do in China, for example. They really experimented that. They actually gave free money.
Yeah, or much easier, promise that you won't levy any negative interest on the central bank digital currency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so stuff like that. Exactly.
And
with better stability. But then what does it mean then for the other commercial banks? Because the way I see it is that it is basically a backdoor. And that's what also the European Central Bank, I think, said. They said, commercial banks, don't worry, we will not take you out of business. And I'm thinking, how? Because they are the ones that give money to those banks that basically create financial products out of it. And now you're taking those middlemen out of the equation and you're telling them like...
They will not be taken out of the equation.
No. Yeah, well, and that's the thing, is that you basically are transforming kind of like this, the Euro project into... it's politics through money. So your money controls what you can spend, how you can spend, where you can spend it. There's a good overview on that. We'll make sure that you won't have any pain on that regard. And if you don't agree as a country, you will be forced to agree into money, right? Because we have a union that cannot agree on consensus base, as we see, because we're so diverse. So money is the only guard left.
Yeah, and then you need to have a majority decision making in the European Union. Our own Prime Minister has already said, I'm willing to give up my veto to, for example, the initiative of the central bank digital currency.
He will not veto it. He will not veto it.
No, exactly. But he is removing his own power to veto anyway.
Why?
Good question. He did it 2 weeks after the election, and it wasn't mentioned in the
news.
In the campaigns running up to the election.
Yeah.
And after 2 weeks, he said, well, by the way, we need to get rid of our veto, and everybody just accepted it. And it is a huge discussion. And
strange.
If a central bank that already issues one currency issues another, because that's what's happening, the new currency will never be a competitor for the existing currency. Why would you put yourself out of business? I think what will happen is, at one point in time, you will have a blue euro and a green euro, or red euro. And there's negative interest being levied on one and not on the other, and you can do hip and cool stuff with it. You get a new app which is climate neutral, and basically, in the end, the whole problem is what the central bank is doing right now. They are saving a bankrupted system. We've mentioned that. If we would have a true political union, if the peoples of Europe would be truly unified, and they would say, okay, we are one people, we will deal with this financial issue, so we can make a fresh start. We get rid of all these old loans. That would be then, as supporting that, the central bank is doing the opposite right now.
Yeah,
they are actually making sure that the old financial system is surviving.
Yeah,
and if we wouldn't be forced to use euros that are created through our own old sick local banks, if there was a true competitor, we would all leave those banks, ABN AMRO, Rabobank, ING, we would leave them behind and they would crumble. The central bank is never going to let that happen. And you can simply tell that from their actions in recent years. They need that system. They need the flow of money to continue. For example, if you just look at the legislation passed the day before yesterday You can easily find it on the Twitter feed of the European Commission. They said, you know what, we will make it easier for banks to sell crap. So if you have a non-performing loan, so the European Central Bank and the European Commission, they said, well, we need a more vibrant. They said, I believe, we need a more vibrant non-performing loans market with higher values for non-performing loans. So for an outside investor, it would have to become more easy and less risky to actually buy non-performing crap. And in doing so, you're helping those old banks offloading their toxic assets. And that's what this whole system has been designed for. And that the same system that's helping those banks in this manner is not going to create a competitor for those banks that could put them out of business. The only thing that the central bank digital currency is likely to compete, to put out of business, is the other competitors to that system. Once you have a central bank digital currency, you can say, okay, there's only one digital currency to rule them all. You can fix, but in order to do that, you have to expropriate people. And you have to nullify the value that's in Bitcoin. And the longer you wait, once again, it will become much more difficult and hard to do that. But I think that at one point in time, there will be a crackdown on digital currencies. People who still want to have a digital currency, which to my knowledge already exists. It's in my pocket. They can go to the central bank digital currency, so you don't need Bitcoin anymore. So we can forbid it.
Well, that's missing the point of the fact that Bitcoin is private money and it is not owned by any institution, by any governing country. And
you can crack down on it if a government wants to.
They make it very hard. They'll make sanctions that you every time you transfer something. That's already happening already now in the US. If you transfer something more than I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, 25K, you need to report it to the IRS and all these other things that are just the first steps that are going there. But in one way, it fuels also the function of Bitcoin because the whole reason why Bitcoin was invented was actually this purpose, right? It's like this international global settlement.
And that's why I sympathize with the Bitcoin people. Of course. What do you think? Yeah.
So they are actually just giving even more fuel to the cause in a way, because that's actually, as you talked about, extremes of, people getting extremist in political ideologies. It's the same way for financial freedom as well. People will have wanted the urge to go to Bitcoin as they did for gold. For example, gold is also not owned by anyone. That's why Charles de Gaulle was such a proponent of gold, because it's not owned by any person that actually dictates the world economy as the US dollar does today. So there will be a need, and of course it will be harder, and it will be the crypto pirates, right?
Yes, but then it will be a more violent crackdown.
It will be violent. I mean, will the future be more violent or more peaceful, Arno?
I think that there's a certain amount of violence ahead of us. And at the end of that violence, there will be peace, as always. But the longer we wait with structural reforms and truly solving certain issues, the more violent the violence in itself will become. What should happen, I think, is that we have big haircuts so that we reorganize our entire financial system. So we say, okay, your mortgage is way too high. The value of the house with respect to the loan-to-value ratio, it is also way too high. So we cancel both, something like that. That's what other people like Willem Middelkoop, what they meant with
the big reset.
The big reset. Now you have the great reset, and that's something else. Now you're basically giving away all your power to to certain government institutions that have proven themselves to be in favor of the status quo. We are making new systems to bail out banks rather than allowing them to go bankrupt, so that you have maybe that there's room for a new alternative. Those decisions will not be made, and that will mean that you'll have more financial shenanigans in the short run. People are accepting it, I think, through the mechanism that I just mentioned with fencing of the canals, and that will result in violence.
What we were now talking about, it sounds like a high-tech financialized dictatorship, and we've discussed some of the consequences. But the ultimate consequence and you touched upon it, is violence. Could you, first of all, do you agree when I talk about a high-tech financialized dictatorship? And secondly, the ultimate consequence in the sense that what has to happen before we can get things straight again?
Well, that's a tremendous question. If you think about it, it's with tremendous implications. Well, in the short run, like I see it, I think that people accept more and more and more. Like you have your savings are being taxed by both your own government and the European Central Bank. So the Dutch tax system.
If you happen to have above 100k.
Yes, that's where it starts. But there are more banks. Somebody just texted me. They said, I'm with a certain bank, and if I make cash withdrawals for twice a day, I will have to pay a little fee. He said about €1 or €2. I won't mention the name of the bank, but there's more people who said it. So that's the next step. So you'll be taxed for basically paying with money that you've earned while paying taxes, and you spend it on stuff that's burdened with value-added tax. And now there's a European Central Bank that actually decides to cause inflation and tax you anyway, and people accept it. I'm afraid that will cause more of these schemes.
Yeah, but this whole inflation thing in the first place is about stability.
Yeah,
price stability.
Yes. That was the whole idea, but now you're doing the opposite. Now you're creating instability. You're making people insecure. You're making sure that actual investments in the real economy, like real businesses doing stuff, making stuff for you, delivering services, making products, those investments are dropping. So you're only making it worse for people. And that's a problematic situation of a status quo. And I've compared it to a marriage that is almost over, a toxic marriage. And people maybe will try for 1 week or another week. Don't do that, because you'll get more angry with each other. And I think that's where we are. But on the bright side, if you get rid of our euro system and of our old banks, and if you say, let's start building a new financial system based bottom up. So people come up with something, they create a system in which trust can prevail. So we make our own money, our own cookie money. I must admit, I just ate the cookie.
That's good.
You haven't seen it, but I just ate it.
It's good.
We have to prevent that from happening.
It's like my savings. I see them one day, they are gone the other day.
They've been eaten, yeah. But you can actually prevent that. So that's the bright side of the story. If you take as a society, as normal working people, like the guy picked up by Nelson Mandela walking on the road, if those people, let's put it that way, anywhere in the world, if they say we've had enough, we want our social contract back. We want the Dutch dream, or the American dream, or the South African dream, or the French dream, or whatever. We want to have that back. Then you can start over. I think it's in the Jewish tradition that you have, how to say, they say every seventh year better.
The law of Jubilee.
Jubilee, exactly. Something like that. Our society is a little bit more technologically evolved than it was in the biblical years. But anyway...
But do you know the difference? Which is actually the difference, but not the difference. Actually, we even touch upon that. Paul Beuting, who was here, we had the exact thing, and so I'll repeat. The law of Jubilee was that the monarchs and the kings at that moment knew very well that because of the fact that the peasants, when they basically took out a loan, those loans were basically written into big stones called cuneiform forms engraved in them, and it was actually one of the first forms of accounting. And in that process, those stones were basically stored in the palaces or the temples, palaces or temple. And the collateral, though, is that if you borrowed some barley because your crop was not very good that year, the collateral was, if you don't pay back, we're going to take your wife and your kids, and they will be enslaved until you pay back. Before you know it, you have a certain amount of peasants that basically get enough of their families imprisoned that they, as pleb, as the ones that are all they got is family, they are stripped from anything. So what do they have to lose? Nothing. So what will they do? They go on the street, they go raid those temples and those palaces, and they go destroy the same cuneiform forms that engraved that debt to actually cancel it. So the kings at that time, the monarchs, they knew this, and they were smart because they learned from repeating patterns, and they said, actually, what? Every 5 years, which at that time was maybe a quarter of your life or something like that.
You get your wife back.
Well, you get your wife back and your kids, and you will cancel your debts as a good deed for you people.
To uphold the social contract and also the social fabric that you were talking about earlier.
Exactly, the balancing, the cleansing of the rebalancing act. So it also was a form already at that time of a big or great reset, right?
Yeah.
So
let's do that.
New.
If you smash the Cumians, as you call it, you always have your collateral. So they're still houses. I mean, if you walk down the street here, it's beautiful. And if you get rid of the financial system that is a burden on the people that actually live in those houses, you still own houses. You don't own nothing. Look at what we have in this country. Then you can own that, and then it can be put to productive use. Mm-hmm. So you get your social contract back. I work hard. I'm a decent guy. I work hard, so I will own something. Who's Klaus Schwab that he says you will own nothing? Mm. What's the whole point in working and being an entrepreneur if you don't get to own anything? The whole system that we have, the whole liberal democratic economic system that we have, is based on ownership rights. That's how you can actually pledge something, how you can take out a loan. You know that you can keep the profits, etc. So if you want to have your society back, we should get rid of our financial system. All our financial system does is damaging people. Maybe if I can give one example that I'm just working on right now. ING Bank, if you're looking, you can actually answer my questions, but you have never done it before, so why look at it? What you can do with your phone, which is quite fun, by the way. People that watch porn on their phones, they know this. You have the invisible mode. You can visit websites. Incognito. Exactly. If you ask for a loan in the incognito mode, and you ask for a loan, you say, "Hey, ING, the bank, I want to have a car. I want to own a car." Then ING will not say, "You will own nothing and you will be happy." No, ING will say, "Well, do you need a green car loan? Een ecologische lening in Belgium." And they quote you a certain percentage. The funny thing is, people can try this at home. You go to Google and you say ING, capital letters, name of the bank, car loan in Dutch, autolening. Then you'll get a quote for 6%. If you use your same phone and you go to the porn mode or incognito, then your phone doesn't know where you are. But because it is in Dutch, it will also look at offers from other banks in other countries, like Belgium. I mean, obviously, if I'm not incognito, then my phone knows where I am. I'm Dutch, so I get a Dutch price, which is 6%. But if my phone doesn't know where I am, then Google will also come up with the Belgium quotes, and they're 1.5%. But with the same bank, the same car, same duration, just a little different name. So in Belgium it's called de ecologische lening, and in Dutch it is called de groene autolening. But it is exactly the same product with the same bank. In Holland it is 6%, in Belgium is 1.5%.
And so what do you think is the difference?
The problem is, and the reason behind it, by the way, please note that this is price discrimination, which is simply illegal. You can't do this. You can't quote different prices to two different people simply based on the country in which they reside. That's discrimination. That's forbidden. And we are supposed to have an internal market in the European Union, but banks can get away with stuff like this. The securitization process, as we call it, so You can repackage existing loans, sell them to investors. That's illegal in Belgium. So the securitization of those loans, which occurs in the Netherlands, isn't acceptable in Belgium. The Belgian government doesn't allow your bank to do that to your loans. So what happens in Belgium is that local banks like ING, with the permit that they have in Belgium, they will get money from the ECB or from their savers, zero interest rate. So it's basically free money. They add a little bit of costs, and they give out loans of 1.5%. And those loans and the interest payments on it are only used to service local savers in Belgium. In the Netherlands, however, these loans can be securitized and be sold to outside foreign investors, maybe Goldman Sachs, Chinese pension fund, etc. And those people, they call up ING and they say, hey, ING, those Dutch people, they will do anything we want from them. And they will pay everything. If their household debt is exploding, they will always pay their mortgages. Dutch mortgages are very, very popular worldwide in the investor community. They're in high demand because we always pay our loans. So these investors say 1.5% on that loan. The same securitized product, the same mortgage-backed security or asset-backed security becomes much more popular with investors if the underlying people don't pay 1.5% on their car, but 6% on their car. So it is actually the international investors that ask our own local banks to do this to their own people, that actually bail them out. If ING fails, the Dutch taxpayer will need to bail out ING. And in return, they do this to us. That proves two points. First of all, this entire financial behemoth that we have, this financial system, doesn't serve the people. Because under normal circumstances, you could say, okay, ING can sell those loans on the international collateral market, the loan for collateralized loans, CDOs, mortgage-backed securities, all this Lehman Brothers stuff, they can do that. That should bring in more supply of money, of credit, as a result of which prices should go down. If you think the way we were taught in school, with the way an economic system is supposed to work, then more supply should give rise to lower prices. But what this ING example shows, and it is only one bank that screws us with car loans, but there's obviously many other examples, is that that prices get higher with more supply. And that is, this whole system isn't designed to help ordinary people run their business, make out small and medium enterprise business loans, etc. We are not the customers. People that go into a bank and think they are the customer, they're wrong. They are the product. And the product is being sold at the back door. Then ING says, well, look at what I did. I sold my car loan to another 100 people. Do you want to buy the contracts of those 100 people? Yeah, now the entire investor community is very happy with ING. But basically, they're taking our money. They're doing this to us.
Bad bank.
Bad bank. And interestingly, if you want to go, to another bank in Europe, you can't.
Meaning
that if you, for example, if you say, okay, I will use my Dutch passport to open up a bank account in Belgium, so I can get a Belgian rates.
Can't happen.
You can't do that.
Why? Why? What's the?
Because banks have made deals with their respective governments to create a cartel, which is illegal, but it is being accepted. And I've pointed this out to several politicians as well, and they know it. And they promised me, they said, well, if you can prove it, if you have the numbers that car loans throughout Europe, that they're very divergent, then we'll do something about it.
We'll consider it, did they say, or do something about it?
They will do something about it. Okay. They will raise it to the Minister of Finance, and that never happened.
Yeah, but you have the numbers, you made your homework, you have everything.
It's very easy. You can.
So if let's say
you can easily do it. You're French.
Yeah.
You go to BNP Paribas.
Yeah.
And you ask for an empreinte écologique pour ma voiture. something like that. And you get different quotes than you get in the Netherlands.
But I do want to ask, because this all leads, and you would think that even these investors would keep this in mind. In the long term, we are all penned up in the Herengracht, and there is a redistribution of wealth. And everybody loses. So a smaller and smaller and smaller group of people that really that benefit from this system are across from a larger and larger group of people that get disenfranchised by this system.
Yes.
So wouldn't that mean? And that's why I keep going back to this point. Doesn't that mean?
I've noticed
that somewhere in, for example, Brussels, there are policymakers or politicians that say, "Okay, guys, we're going to where we are on this path, and we need to get off of this path because what awaits us at the end isn't nice, even for the small group of even for the people like Klaus Schwab, because he should be able to know what happens at the end of this path, right?"
Well, he doesn't. Wealthy people only benefit from this.
For how long?
Well, that's very interesting. There's a lot of people who support me, and interestingly enough, it is usually quite wealthy people. So there's somebody who's helping me set up a website, who paid my rent once for me when I was in a lockdown and I couldn't even go out and work. And it was actually a homeowner. So this specific gentleman, I won't mention his name, but he has a certain business. He sells his goods abroad, and he's making a lot of money. He's doing okay, and he's not really hurt by the Corona crisis because of the nature of his business. And then he uses some of his profits to buy real estate. And he notices there's a housing shortage, so he can get those mortgage loans at very profitable terms. Then he can rent out those houses, and he makes another giant profit. And then he starts questioning himself. So that's the whole point. If you look at your own little world, with your own mortgage and your house and your income and your pension and your car with a empreinte écologique, then people will tend to want to protect that. But a limited number of people is willing to look beyond it and say, okay, wait a minute, what is this doing to society? Like this gentleman, he says, okay, I have new tenants and I could double the rent. I won't say if he did it or not, but at a certain point of time, he starts to realize, hey, is this good for society? Is this what is this doing for society at large? If he really starts to question those things, he will decrease the rent, which he did. But there's a minority of people that think like this. The overwhelming majority of people are either not interested in the general interest, in the general welfare, or are only looking at their own self-interest in terms of monetary value. How do I get out of it what I can?
Could I conclude that just as during biblical times, where a lot of people were enslaved by the monarchy, we are doomed to repeat the mistakes?
Well, you don't, and that's the once you know it. We have history. We have history books, like I mentioned in a discussion at the coffee machine. You have in Germany, it's a certain period in history, and it's called Kipper und Wipper Zeit. I specifically do it in German. Kipper und Wipper, it's quite interesting. If you just first look at the translation, it's a period of crisis in 18th century Germany. And it was a massive crisis. It coincided with a war. And you might even call that the very first World War, because this war expanded all over the continent. In the colonies, was very brutal. several areas in Germany really got depopulated. It's like World War II stuff, but then with less technology. What happened at a certain point in time is that, and that's the point of kippen. Kippen is a Yiddish word, and it means circumcision, like you do with a little boy's penis. And you can do that to money. So Germany had a lot of small states, and it was politically fragmented, and they all used to have their own currency. And if you're a businessman and you travel abroad, so you make bratwurst in München, and then you want to sell them to the dukedom in Hessen or whatever. Obviously, as a trader, you have all these coins in your pocket. Then you go home, you deposit them at your own central bank, and at a certain point in time, local rulers, they discovered that in the vaults of their respective banks, they had all these different currencies from other nations. And they used to peel off a little bit of the metal at the edges. And if you look at a euro coin right now, I don't know if you have one, you can see that you can't do that without impunity. It has these little marks on the side. So if I were to use a knife and scrape something of this euro, another user would immediately feel it. Nowadays, you don't go and take a knife and scratch some of it from the... It's actually worthless. You don't do that. You do other stuff. But the principle is the same. You have a certain amount of money that fits an economy, and you make monetary tricks to create more money out of nothing. The result of that was, and then they eventually financed wars with it, because you have all these little pieces of a coin, and you can mint new coins and actually pay soldiers in the other constituency. There you have an army and you can wage war. But then the other guy realizes what you're doing, and then he will do it too. And that period was called Kipper and Wipper Zeit. Kipper, that refers to taking small chunks of a coin. Wipper means seesaw, zigzaggen. And that refers to the societal imbalances that you have. Meaning, Kipper und Wipper Zeit, if you do that to people's money, if you take away their livelihoods, if you cause them to feel uncertain about their own house, they will get violent. You will get war. That's the entire lesson of it. Mm-hmm. The lesson was repeated in the Weimar Republic, when very high inflation caused people to feel insecure, and I don't need you to tell what happened next. So one could say that the lesson from Kipper und Wipper Zeit is that the Second World War and Hitler, it should never have happened. So please don't cause inflation in Germany. Don't do it. If there's one economic lesson in history, and if you doubt it, you can still look at your coin at the edges. Hey, wait a minute, what he said was true. All the evidence is there. And what do? We mess with the value of money. Now, central banks can do the same, obviously, without scratching coins.
What they can do,
it's invisible, but the mechanism is the same. If you print money, what people fail to appreciate is that the right side of the central bank's balance sheet, like every business has a balance sheet, our euros are at the right side of the central bank balance sheet. So if the central bank is diluting itself, they are not literally diluting their own money. I mean, Christine Lagarde doesn't own shares in the ECB, so she's not working with her own money. Mm. The money she's diluting is the money that I have in my pocket. So there's absolutely no way that you can have a central bank experiment like this without hurting the people. You're diluting euros. Well, who are you damaging? People with those euros in your pocket.
Mm. It's actually, now we're talking about historical facts, and I've looked up, I love etymologies, and every now and then I come up with one of those things during our episodes. But actually, do you know the origin of the word paying?
I knew it. I forgot it.
Paying comes from pacifying, pacifare, from the Latin, pacifying. It means that actually, talking about the Germans, I'm half German. My ancestors, half of me, they had and maybe like I'm not getting all the facts straight, so don't judge me on that. But there was, to simply said, put the Teutonics basically at that time were having a basically it was called a head system, where basically you had a way to quantify the value of any damage, corporate damage. Meaning, if we go into a fight and chop an arm off, there would be an equal amount of at that moment the currency we used that I would need to basically, as a retribution, pay me back to pacifying the violence of escalation, right?
Okay, my price is a golden spoon.
Hopefully we won't get into a fight. So that is basically the whole the core of it is money as a pacifier, right?
Okay.
To de-escalate. And as you erode the tool, the instrument of money as a trust mechanism that we defer through balance sheets and systematize into the economy and financial world we live in today, it gets back to the very, very primal being of our survivals, or primate kind of instincts of having to, like gorillas, just like fight for that in the sake of survival.
Exactly. So that's what you would want to have. You need some security. Everybody wants a little bit of security. They want to look in their bank account and know, okay, I can make it to the end of the year, preferably maybe the end of the month, but at least the end of the week. And if you take that from people, historically, I think it is really, really dangerous. And
so war, we can expect civil war, or what's the?
Well, I think you'll. Luckily, the same elites that brought down our own currency, or our economic system, also got rid of our armies. So we won't be able to invade Russia. But I think that what we should expect is people becoming more extreme, and that you will get violence in your cities, and one group against another.
Yeah.
So
high unemployment, more criminality.
Exactly.
Societal
I know
struggle.
Societal struggle. And what's happening right now is that it may be unrelated, but it's not really unrelated. Albania and Kosovo are right now being allowed into the European Union.
It's final.
Yes,
it's happening.
It was already final. It was an aspect of our elections.
Albania and Kosovo.
Yeah, and they have enormous quantities of Kalashnikovs. And the communists, they really knew how to make reliable weapons that can endure through the ages. Hundreds of thousands of them are missing, but you can already find them on the streets because they're smuggled in. In the street where I live, there's a primary school, and there was a shooting a few weeks ago with Kalashnikovs. A bunch of criminals started to fire at each other. Within a few years that I lived there, about 10 people have been murdered with heavy assault weapons.
But in the center of Amsterdam, where is that?
In the west of Amsterdam.
Yeah.
And you have criminal gangs that are actually willing and capable of using this kind of force. It is not like in a James Bond movie or a Sherlock Holmes. I have a gun, I will commit a crime passionnel with one bullet and then run. No, those people literally have assault weapons built for the Albanian and the Yugoslavian national armies, and grenades, and they're all gone and nobody knows where they are. What I'm afraid of is that you have a situation that you have streets flooded with heavy assault weapons, so you can literally target anybody. Also, people who say stuff you don't like the Charlie Hebdo situation. How on earth did these people get military-grade weapons? So your streets will be flooded with that. If you choose to be a decent guy, once again, I took this argument from my friend Pieter Omtzigt, the social contract, the way in which a government and the citizens cooperate together. What can one expect from the other? Well, one is actually the government is maintaining a financial system that's repressive towards that civilian. Well, that's going to end in, I think, political extremism.
So what's the cure, Mr. Doctor?
Yeah, is there a way out?
The law of Jubilee.
The reset.
And then the big reset, not the great reset, but the big reset. Accept that you have a problem from a game theoretical point of view, that is very difficult, like I said, because half of the people in the short run are benefiting. So it will be very, very hard to actually convince them. So I'm afraid that we will see some more social breakdown. I had it a few months ago. Somebody I know in Amsterdam who was really well off. And they had a relative who wanted to bring their children to a hospital. But the hospital wasn't able to take that child. Because there's no nurses.
Space. Yeah.
I mean, Amsterdam is, like I always say, it is the white money laundering center of the world. And right next to it we have a hospital. And that hospital can't accept any more children because there are no nurses. They're willing to pay those nurses. But nurses that actually want to live in Amsterdam, they can't. So they won't apply for a job. So complete units in that hospital are understaffed. You would have thought that due to Corona, and now you see the value of a functioning healthcare system, you would have expected our government to be more cautious and more respectful towards those people. The healthcare heroes, we call them. Mm-hmm. They don't get a raise. So in the same year that the Corona crisis and the ramifications of the central bank policy ensures that housing prices will increase by 10%, those hospitals already have a shortage of hands of people, simply because people can't afford to live in the neighborhood of the hospital, and they have to, because they have to be there in a crisis situation. We freeze their wages. We see that housing prices increase by 10% per year, and then we freeze their wages.
But not the rents.
And finally, sometimes people say, "Hey, I went to the hospital and there was nobody there."
But
and then I can say,
because it's two different things. The rents actually, and the ones I saw, kind of even declined during Corona because a lot of people left the city. The prices for buying definitely increased, but the rents decreased or not.
Those rents will eventually always follow. Mm-hmm. The mortgage prices, so the housing prices itself. And indeed what happened is that a lot of temporary workers, tourists, so you can't rent out your home to tourists if there's a lockdown, obviously, but when those people will come back, that decline that you mentioned will be reversed and be more than reversed, and now nurses are also incapable of renting a place.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. There will be a shock.
Absolutely. When you open up the markets, when you open up the society, we will get literally tens of millions of tourists
flooding the streets.
They will be wanting to rent a place or stay somewhere. Then investors can buy homes, snatch them away from the nurse, rent it out illegally. Dutch government will accept it because the Dutch government it knows all too well.
Didn't they actually now, correct me if I'm wrong, they just installed like new legislation that actually forbids investors to buy a house if it's not for their own use? So basically
they break it.
Yeah,
I've seen it many times. They simply break the regulations.
Oh really?
Yes.
But
I can give you examples, but I won't do it right now because I would have to prepare that.
Okay.
But I can show you files. There's a certain social housing institution. They sell a house. I will name the prices, then they know I'm onto them. They have a house worth €400,000, and it was formerly a social welfare housing. So the house was worth maybe €100,000. They sell it for €400,000, and the one who buys it is obliged to actually live in it. So that's the anti-speculation clause. But but this speculator buys it with a firm, and if you look at the address of the firm, you will find a villa outside of Amsterdam, and this guy has hundreds of houses. So he at the moment when he signed the contract, he bought a house. The housing corporation, they could very easily see that this guy wasn't going to live there because he's a well-known speculator. So they broke it from the start. He buys it. A week later, he puts it on Funda for €800,000.
Okay.
And that it all happens. And I asked that particular corporation, and And they didn't want to answer me. They said, okay, we'll look into it. And they never did. They never came up with an answer. So all these rules, they are there on paper, but they will be broken. And there's an incentive for the government to not be too keen on respecting those laws. I mean, enforcing those laws. Because to save your banks, you will need a lot of immigration and tourism.
Yeah.
God forbid that those housing prices will start to collapse.
Arno, we went from housing and we ended up at housing.
And in between we had Kalashnikov.
And there was a lot of information in between. I think I would like to have you back at least.
Are you sure?
Because at least in the year that you invited yourself back, you are always welcome.
Thank you.
It was amazing having you again, and be sure to know that you are always welcome.
Okay.
I think to all the viewers on the YouTube channel, if you like this episode, please give it a like. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do. And if you have a question or a comment below in the comment section, always feel free to answer or ask us any questions. Alexei?
Yeah, well, if you're listening to us actually on one of the podcast platforms, please leave us a rating. And if you feel that it added value or it might be interesting to someone else, just share it. And that was it from my side.
And then we will see each other in a new episode of the Gold Republic Podcast.